Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com. Today we're going to be looking at, are you a technician or are you a mechanic? This is episode 70 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. In just a minute, you're going to be joining Rusty and I talking about automotive technician or automotive mechanic. Just a quick heads up, there's a little bit of camera weirdness in the beginning of the video, so bear with it. The second half is quite a bit better, and the content is awesome, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy the show. Today, Rusty and I are going to be talking about mechanic or technician.
Good. So, do you think there's a difference between the two?
I'm going to save my answer for a few minutes because I'm going to ask you the question of, do you think there's a difference?
I definitely do.
This is a really hot button issue with guys and girls in the industry because you see the question posed and people get really heated about it.
Well, I think
really heated about it.
Yeah, I think it's due to perceptions, and that's kind of my biggest beef between the two.
Okay.
Because,
so tell us sort of what your perception is of mechanic and your perception of technician.
For me, when I hear mechanic, my first mental picture is shade tree mechanic.
Okay.
Which
makes sense.
I literally took my car when I was 16 years old. The engine went bad in it, and I guess before I learned how to work on it, I took it to a gentleman who was going to put a new engine in it for me. Well, it was a 65 Mustang, great car. You know, I'd saved up all my money. I put brand new bumpers on it, chrome bumpers. You know, back then they were $250. I remember that. And the first thing the guy did was put a bumper jack in the center of the front bumper to jack it up. Well, it's bolted on, brand new bumper. And it's bolted at either end, and those bumpers were, you know, a 1/16 of an inch thick, and so the car didn't move, but the bumper started to go up like that. So, and it was literally under an oak tree. He was going to use the branch to pull the engine out. So that may have steered me to one side of this issue, but shade tree mechanic, and there are a lot of them out there that are very good and have been over the years, but you get the feeling that they do it by feel. They do it by experience. I had this car did this one time, so let me go do this. And they do a lot of stuff by ear. And so, do you want me to go ahead and tell you about the other technician?
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about mechanic, and it seems that like when you hear the word mechanic, you impart the word shade tree into it.
Mentally, I do that.
Okay.
Now that's a little bit unfair. I will say this because I think I do understand how modern mechanics are talented people, and they don't really deserve that moniker. But I can see that side of the issue, so that's why I work really hard I use the word technician now.
Okay.
Because and I guess because a lot of times I'm talking to a customer, and they need to know these guys are not shade tree mechanics.
Right.
They are technicians. They are damn near engineers.
So you're sort of overcoming your own bias,
right,
and imparting that on a customer,
yeah,
by calling the person working on their car a technician versus the person working on their car a mechanic.
Right, because to be honest with you, a lot of times they use the term mechanic.
Right.
And I'm trying to just raise, you know, there's a lot of psychology in this business, so I'm just trying to raise that level of expectation that what we're doing is not easy. He's not just turning a screw back there. He's using diagnostic equipment. We're not trying to guess what's wrong with your car. We're trying to find what's wrong with your car and tell you what it is.
So that sort of then maybe describes a little bit about how you feel about the word technician, is someone that's going to be using diagnostic equipment and diagnosing a car versus fixing a car.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, the end result is the same, but
absolutely. And you stole my point 4, which is on the board.
Oh,
the imaginary board.
No, yeah. It's right there. It's always there.
Okay. Well. Yes, I alluded to it a while ago. I think a mechanic, and my grandfather was a mechanic, and he had the reputation of being fantastic. He could listen to a car and tell you what's wrong with it. And you know as well as I do, many times you can listen to a car and tell what's going on with it. You know, back when he was working on, we had no computers on them. You know, it was all strictly mechanical. But nowadays, I do see a difference. You have to be, you know this, you have to practically be an engineer. You have to want to put the effort into it. You have to put, you know, hundreds of hours of after hours or your own time into figuring out how to be a good technician. I was going to say mechanic.
See, you got yourself hooked into the.
I did
into the perception bias though.
I did, but I guess it's just that I understand, but not being a technician, I understand most of what goes into it.
Right.
And so I'm trying to make sure the guys get the credit for it.
And I think for a lot of guys that they need that. They need
Certainly.
to feel like they're not a shade tree mechanic. This is the second show in a row I've done air quotes, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. You need to feel like, I don't want to say you need to feel that you're better than that,
right.
but you're different than that. You're a professional versus Uncle Bobby that fixes cars, on the weekend for the family.
Sure.
But it's an interesting thing to think about, and honestly one that I haven't put a ton of thought into, because when I talk to customers, it's me talking to a customer.
Sure.
It's not a mechanic talking to a customer or a tech talking to a customer. It's just me. And I realize that, like, I'm kind of an oddball in... I know, right? In not only
you guys don't see that,
on
do you?
video... Yeah, no one's ever seen that. Not only, in this world, I guess, but... In the automotive world specifically, is because I really like talking to customers, and that's benefited me very well in my career. So I don't even see it. I don't think about it. It doesn't ever cross my mind.
I don't think it's an absolute.
It's just Charles talking to a customer.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. And I don't think there's an absolute. I don't think all customers or people who aren't technicians, I don't think all of them think mechanic is dirty, or I don't think they all understand. I don't think many of them have an understanding of what it takes.
That's true.
But, the mechanic started out as the guy who rode with the driver in the car back when cars were new, because they had to stop literally every 15 or 20 miles to manually oil the valve train of the engine to pump up the pressure for the fuel system so the car would run. I mean, all these things that we really take for granted nowadays in the most basic modern car used to have to be done manually. So someone had to be riding with the guy to actually make the car go. So, and that evolved, I was going to say devolved, but it evolved into the hot rodder mentality. The guy with the Lucky Strikes rolled up in his t-shirt with grease back here on a 32 Ford with a flathead V8 in it. And that's the tinkering. Because they had dwell meters and stuff like that, but the mental picture that most people have of that is just someone who's kind of throwing stuff at a car.
Right.
Nowadays, though, you've got, contained networks in the car. You've got multiple contained networks that you've got to be able to differentiate what's going on. They give you codes. The code doesn't tell you how to fix the car. You have to go follow, the recommended from whatever manufacturer it is, their process for finding these things. And still, that doesn't always tell you. You have to have an understanding of how all these processes work together. And that's much more than a mechanic to me.
Okay.
And I'm trying to impart that on customers and those folks that ask the questions.
And I think when you're explaining it to a customer, it's explaining or trying to impart onto a customer how advanced things are is really important. But you brought up a point about a mechanic, I don't know if this was the exact words used, throwing parts on a car, but the other side of that is you have modern technicians who hook the computer up to the car says it's got an evap leak, they throw a gas cap on it. Well, that didn't fix it. So they throw the next part on it because that's the next part in the system. That didn't fix it. So now the only difference really is the computer told them to put it on versus no one told them to put it on. They just put it on.
Yeah.
So it's still, I guess to me...
If the modern... Sorry to interrupt you,
that's
but
okay.
if the modern technician, without being told to do it by computer or without it being the logical next step, I'll put it that way, if they're just like, oh, I got that on, let me put a gas cap on, see if that fixes it. That's a mechanic. They're just working on a car. They're not a technician. And I guess that's, kind of to the base point of the two different terminologies. Is if you're going to be a technician, and at some point, you may have to guess it apart. I'm not saying this is not an exact science sometimes, but there is a reason. You got a set of data that is telling you that you can either go this way or this way. Well, let's find the cheap way first, the easy way first. That's not a derogatory easy way. I mean, that's a logical easy. The
most affordable way or the easiest way.
Right.
I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
No.
So, we've talked a lot. Well, you've talked a lot about. I've just interrupted you a bunch. About what to you it means to be a technician, and that seems to be diagnostic based, process based.
Right.
I would say computer based. And that
It doesn't necessarily have to be computer, but that is
may
how
just
it's
be
going
more
modern.
right. That may
But
just
they're,
be a modern person that fixes cars versus not modern person that fixes cars.
I don't think you can be. I think it would be very difficult to be a mechanic today.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. So I've kind of kept mine sort of close because I have a very nonchalant
You
opinion.
gonna blow me out here?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. Because that's how you feel about it,
Right.
and I absolutely wouldn't do that. But to me, they're just two words. It's a technician and a mechanic.
I understand that. I'm comfortable with that.
As the Humble Mechanic brand, obviously, I use the terms interchangeably. It's almost, to me, what is the word that flows better with whatever I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Am I talking about a diagnostic technician? That sounds more right.
Right.
More righter. More properer.
Okay.
Am I
Great with cars.
Yes. Am I talking about someone that's, if I say diagnostic tech, that's how I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
If I say auto mechanic, that's how I say it. I don't say auto tech.
Yeah.
I could say an automotive technician, but this is a very fast-paced world that I live in, so I don't have time for all that.
Too many syllables.
Yeah, absolutely that. But so I've built a brand based on the word mechanic.
Yeah.
And I live in a very high-tech world,
Right.
day to day, where most people would say you're a technician.
Well, that's kind of a different application of the term because if you're on the
And humble
YouTube,
technician sounded stupid.
yeah, absolutely. But if you put out there that you're a technician and nobody knows anything about your humble estate here, if you just put it out there and nobody knows what you do for a living and you say I'm a technician, that could be. I mean, you could be a radiology technician and you could be a satellite technician. You could be working. That doesn't necessarily mean automotive.
Right.
So if you're putting on the internets,
I
did that intentionally.
All of the internets.
All of the internets. Put up mechanic. People know what you're doing for the most part. It could be tractors,
or they at least
they know you're working on a vehicle or an engine.
the picture that they place in their head goes to working on vehicles, cars, trucks, whatever.
Right. I guess naturally I revert back to what I do, and it's on the dealership level. So I'm thinking about how I impart this information onto the car owner.
So when you say mechanic, it immediately imparts a story about how you fix cars.
Right.
When you say technician, it's whatever. But
Right.
to me, it always goes back to this political correctness of, are you a secretary or are you an administrative assistant?
Right.
It's the same job. It's the same world that you live in. And people can say, I'm a mechanic because I fix everything. Or I'm a technician. So the mechanic camp says, I'm a mechanic. I can fix whatever kind of car comes in the store. And the mechanic camp thinks of the technician as, you work at a dealership, you know how to fix one car.
Yeah.
And the technician camp says, I'm a highly specialized technician.
Right.
I'm, advanced computer diagnostics.
Right.
Mechanics change oil and put ball joints on cars.
Yeah.
And so the two worlds sort of are opposing to each other.
And all of it's unfair.
But all of them do both.
And all of it's fair. I mean, it depends on your audience. Much of the time, but if we're just talking about using these two terms, and I think it's all completely unfair because you're right. I mean, you are working on something, whether it's a lawnmower or a bus or a semi or a Volkswagen. I guess technically the terms are interchangeable, but I use them because a lot of what I do is somewhat political.
So it's on your output of the word, it becomes paying tribute almost to a perception.
Yes.
Whereas if I say the word technician, it sounds better.
Yeah.
In the other party's brain.
I will be using the executive assistant rather than the secretary. Yeah.
Okay, and that's fair. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all.
Right.
I'm saying
evidently I do that a lot because I don't use like a clerk. I'll use administrator. Yeah.
It's like a trash person, no matter what you call them, has a very important role, of which they didn't pick my trash up last week, of picking up trash. And
And it's critical.
It's a huge part of society.
Yeah.
So you call a secretary an administrative assistant or a secretary. are you making it worse by playing into the political correctness of it, or are you making it better? Are these words really, like, at the end of it, you're doing the same thing? And that's where I'm coming from.
And I understand that completely. I think a lot of my bias towards this is trying to impart a certain level of respect.
Sure,
Because
and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there that, you've seen the customer come in that thinks everybody's below him or her. There's also those people that come in here and they try to talk down to us because, one, we're dealership employees. They're not the most respected profession. As a service advisor, the service advisors take a lot of gruff from people.
They are the punching bag of the dealership.
Holy mackerel. So I try to make sure they understand that I know what they're going through. So I try to impart some respect to them. I do it to the sales guys. I do it. So I guess that's predominantly where I'm coming from. I'm trying to get maybe that customer, because I don't know where they're coming from, trying to get them to understand there's more to this than just adjusting the screw on a carburetor.
Right.
Because they don't exist anymore. But that's still the perceptions of what happens back there. When I say back there, I mean in the shop. Hasn't changed in 40 years. So
to play the devil's advocate of that, you brought up about turning a screw on a carburetor. Right. How many technicians do you know that could tune a car that live in the world of fixing cars can tune a carburetor?
I thought I knew 2. 1 has proven to be incapable, so I learned to do it myself, and now I'm a mechanic.
Okay, so if you were handed a computer, could you interpret certain, let's say, values of parameters of an engine?
Absolutely, and I used to do that.
Okay.
But I was never a professional technician, but I knew enough once I got to learn how to operate the thing. Yeah, I could get a lot of information out of it. So if I were to choose that as a profession...
This is a smile of being right, just so you know.
If I were to choose working on cars to being a profession, I would be a technician. And I would probably be pissed off if someone called me a mechanic.
And that actually is an interesting point, because I remember thinking back to tech school, and see, I just said it there. I just said tech school. I didn't say mechanic school.
Well, they don't call it mechanic school.
I said tech school just because that's how the words come out of my mouth.
But that's the accepted term for the school.
Right.
Whether it's vocational technician school.
Right. It's tech school, or because mechanic school sounds weird. Yeah. They teach you that you are not a mechanic. You are paying a lot of money to get this training. You are training to be a technician.
Right.
So they sort of have what you're explaining, where they're trying to bring up the level of the industry by calling you a technician. But for me, what it all boils down to is, can you fix a car? Mm-hmm. Do you know what the hell you're doing? Mm-hmm. Do you understand how these systems work? Can you grab a scan tool, plug it in, read the fault, interpret what's going on, and paint the story of what the vehicle is seeing versus what it should be seeing? And can you change oil, change tires, change brakes, change ball joints, change axles, and do a tune-up? Can you, a technician and a mechanic in today's world, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to do all of that. Otherwise, all you are is a parts changer. I can change brakes. That doesn't mean anything, because anybody can turn 4 screws.
Right. Well, and not to beat this point to death, but you haven't changed my mind in that there is a difference in perception between the two terms. But to your point, the person who just saw what happened last time and expects to do the same thing next time is not a technician.
Yes,
that or is a parts replacer, which right. Well, and that's where
right. Or we could maybe call them like a D-level tech, because they can at least remember what they did last week.
And that's not to say that there's not a place for those folks, but if they want to be a professional at it, they need to take that to. They need to understand the difference between a technician and a parts changer.
Now, see, a technician and parts changer, I'm interested in having the conversation of the difference on.
I did that for you.
I
did that for you.
For that. So,
because a mechanic is more than a parts changer.
Absolutely.
So I guess there's a hierarchy.
Allegedly.
Okay.
So, 30 seconds, sum it up. Difference between a technician and a mechanic.
A technician is just that much more of a professional than a mechanic.
Okay.
I think I understand your point, and I don't have that much of a stigma between the two, but I do think there is a delineated difference between them.
Fair enough. And I appreciate that you think that.
I appreciate that you appreciate that.
Excellent. So we've beaten the technician, / mechanic thing, I think, quite a bit to death.
Yes, we have.
Proved our points.
That horse is dead.
I think we still a little bit disagree.
Yeah?
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I think we're largely like 90% on the same page.
I would agree. I think there's a little difference. You're saying that you don't think there's that much difference.
I think the only difference, if you said, Charles, you have got to put a difference on the two, I think it's more...
Charles, you have to put a difference on the two.
Thank you for saying that.
Okay.
I think a technician is perceived as someone who fixes modern cars, where a mechanic is someone that fixes cars that are maybe a little bit older.
Yeah.
I think, again, the terms are 100% interchangeable. I know a lot of you guys don't think that, and that's cool. I'm not saying that, thinking one way or the other is wrong, because that would be very stupid of me to say. But I use the terms interchangeably. I don't get offended or sad or one either way.
So what you're saying is, as a technician, you're humble. So you call yourself a mechanic.
If that's what you want to say. That's
no,
cool.
you said it.
I don't
Because you named your...
Well, again, humble technician sounds stupid.
You are a humble mechanic.
Let's wrap this up before this gets ridiculous.
Okay.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments... Oh, we forgot the question of the day.
What is the question of the day?
Question of the day, what do you call yourself, a technician or a mechanic? All right, if you have any questions or comments, post it in the comments section below. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube.
Yeah, on the webs.
You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the blog, humblemechanic.com. And obviously...
Oh, what's the name of the website? Sorry.
Obviously on YouTube.
Oh, I gotcha.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hey, check out Bench Racing Garage for all of Rusty's incredible amount of updates at a nauseating level.
Crazy.
Check out his updates on the Trans Am. Very cool engine build, cool car build.
Got to drive it
Fun
today.
car. Enough horsepower to put a smile on your face.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Loud
all that
enough.
really matters.
Stinks.
Fun times.
Smells good. Yeah.
Something a mechanic would definitely work on.
Definitely mechanic's car. Most definitely mechanic's car.
All right, guys, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Take care.
We forgot to talk about our beer. Credits should be rolling. Well, probably not minutes, but
okay, a few seconds.
Yeah.
Where are they from?
Go ahead.
Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
What's the name of it?
Poppy. This is actually the IPA that turned me on to IPAs.
So this is the Butler Ball.
Second IPA that turned me on to IPA. Racer 5.
Racer?
Racer 5. Racer. Like Racer 5. It's good.
Anything to do with cars on it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right, that's enough of that.
Yeah.